The alarm sang through the monitoring station like a dying bird. Vorkon lifted his head from the data screen, his four eyes narrowing at the sound. Around him, other Silthari scientists stopped their work and turned toward the main display. Unknown object detected, the computer announced in its flat voice. Sector 792. Distance 40,000 kilometers. Vorkon stood from his chair, his tall, thin body unfolding like a piece of paper. He walked to the main screen and touched it with one long finger. The image changed, showing empty space filled with stars. Then he saw it. A dark shape floating alone in the black. Bring it closer, he said. The image grew larger. The object was a ship, but not like any ship Vorkon had seen before. It was long and gray, with a shape that reminded him of ancient weapons from his world's history. The hull was damaged in places with marks that showed old battles. Scorch marks ran along its sides like scars. Scan it, Vorkon ordered. The technician at the next station pressed several buttons. Numbers and symbols filled a smaller screen beside the main image. The technician's face changed, showing confusion. Sir, the readings are strange. This vessel is very old. The power systems use nuclear fission. The propulsion is chemical-based. This technology is at least 300 years behind current standards. Vorkon moved closer to the screen. 300 years old? That made no sense. Ships that old were usually broken down for parts or kept in museums. They did not drift in deep space near Silthari territory. Life signs? Vorkon asked. None, the ship appears abandoned. Then where did it come from? The technician worked quietly for a moment. I am detecting markings on the hull. They appear to be in an unknown language. Wait, the computer is translating now. He paused. The markings say USS Missouri, BB-63. Vorkon repeated the words slowly. USS Missouri. He had never heard of this ship or the people who made it. Send a message to the council. Tell them we have found something unusual. The technician nodded and began typing. Vorkon could not stop looking at the ship on the screen. Something about it made him uncomfortable. The design was wrong. Most ships in the galaxy were smooth and curved, built to move quickly through space. They used energy shields for protection and light materials to stay fast. This ship was different. It had sharp angles and looked heavy. It looked like it was made to hit things, not avoid them. 2 days passed before the council representatives arrived. They came in a fast ship that gleamed white against the stars. Vorkon met them at the docking bay. There were 3 of them. A Centauri diplomat with blue skin and 6 arms, a Drex military advisor covered in thick scales, and a Vreen scientist whose body glowed softly in the dim light. Show us this discovery, the Centauri said. Her name was Lyrasol, and she spoke with the voice of someone used to giving orders. Vorkon led them to the observation deck. The Missouri floated outside the window, looking even larger now that their station had moved closer. The council representative stood silent for a long moment. It is primitive, the Drex said finally. His voice was deep and rough. Why bring us here for this? Because of what it is made from, Vorkon answered. He called up the scan results on a nearby screen. Look at the hull composition. The Vreen scientist stepped forward, her glow brightening with interest. She studied the numbers, then looked at Vorkon with wide eyes. This cannot be correct. Run the scan again. I have run it 7 times, Vorkon said. The results are always the same. What is it? Lyrasol asked, irritation in her voice. The Vreen scientist pointed at the screen. The hull is made of steel. Solid steel? The armor plating in some places is over 400 millimeters thick. Silence filled the room. That is impossible, the Drex said. No one builds ships that way. The weight alone would make it too slow to be useful. Yet here it is, Vorkon said quietly. Lyrasol moved closer to the window. Her 6 arms crossed over her chest in thought. Why would anyone build a ship this way? It makes no sense. Shields are lighter and more effective. Perhaps they did not have shield technology, the Vreen suggested. Then they should have made their ships faster, harder to hit, the Drex argued. Not heavier. Vorkon had been thinking about this for 2 days. He had formed a theory, but it seemed too strange to be true. Now, looking at the confused faces around him, he decided to speak. What if they built it this way on purpose? He said. What if their plan was not to avoid damage, but to survive it? The others looked at him. Think about it, Vorkon continued. Our ships use shields and speed. When those fail, our ships are destroyed. But this vessel... He gestured at the Missouri. This vessel is the shield. It is built to take hits and keep fighting. That is a brutal philosophy, Lyrasol said softly. Yes, Vorkan agreed. But look at the damage on the hull. This ship has been in battles. It has been hit many times, yet it survived long enough to be abandoned, not destroyed. The Drex walked to the window and pressed one clawed hand against the glass. I want to see inside. Send a boarding team. Vorkan had already prepared for this. Within an hour, a small team in spacesuits left the station and crossed to the Missouri. Vorkan watched from the observation deck as they cut through an airlock and entered the dead ship. The team's leader was named Kesava, a young Shilthari with more courage than sense. His voice came through the speakers as he moved through the ship's corridors. The interior is cramped, Kesava reported. The ceilings are low. Everything is made of metal. There is no comfort here. Find the command center, Vorkan instructed. The team moved deeper into the ship. The camera feeds showed narrow hallways and small rooms packed with equipment. Everything looked old and maintained by hand rather than automated systems. I found something, Kesava said. It looks like a weapon system. The camera showed a massive gun turret. 3 long barrels pointed forward, each one wider than Kesava was tall. The metal was thick and heavy. What kind of weapon is this? Lyrasol asked. Vorkan pulled up the scan data. According to the readings, these are kinetic weapons. They fire physical projectiles using chemical explosives. Primitive, the Drex muttered. Perhaps, Vorkan said. But look at the size. Each projectile would weigh over 1,000 kilograms. Fired at high velocity, the kinetic energy would be enormous. The boarding team continued their exploration. They found crew quarters, each one small and simple. They found engines, massive and complex. They found storage areas filled with ammunition and supplies. Everywhere they looked, they found more evidence of the same design philosophy. Heavy, durable, built to last. Finally, they reached the command center. Kesava's camera showed a room filled with instruments and controls. In the center was a chair, presumably for the ship's commander. Kesava moved to a console and activated it. To everyone's surprise, it still had power from some backup system. I am accessing the ship's records, Kesava said. Data began flowing to the station. Vorkan watched as files appeared on his screen. Ship logs, maintenance records, mission reports. And then he saw it. A single line that made his blood run cold. This vessel served for over 50 years, he said slowly. It fought in multiple wars. It was hit by bombs, missiles, and enemy fire. It survived all of it. Impossible, Lyrasol whispered. Not impossible, Vorkan corrected. Just different from what we know. He pulled up more records. The Missouri was not alone. It was one of many such ships. Dozens of them, all built the same way. All built to absorb damage that would destroy any modern vessel. Who built this ship? The Drex demanded. Vorkan searched through the files until he found the answer. They call themselves humans. Their world is called Earth. Have we made contact with them? Vorkan checked the council databases. His 4 eyes widened. Yes, first contact was established 18 months ago. They requested trade relations and a seat on the council. And their request is still being reviewed. Lyrasol turned from the window, her expression serious. I think we need to speed up that review. Anyone who builds ships like this, we need to know more about them. Vorkan nodded slowly. He looked at the Missouri floating in space, silent and dead but still threatening somehow. It was just an old warship, abandoned and forgotten, but it represented something that made him deeply uncomfortable. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that did not believe in avoiding danger. They believed in facing it directly, in building walls of metal so thick that nothing could break through. And if this was what they built 300 years ago, what were they building now? That question would haunt Vorkan in the days to come. Vorkan stood inside the Missouri's main corridor and felt the weight of history around him. 3 days had passed since the boarding team first entered the ship. Now he was here himself, walking through the metal halls with his own feet. He had insisted on coming. Some things could not be understood through cameras and sensors alone. The air inside was cold and stale. The station had connected temporary life support, but it only made the ship feel more like a tomb. Vorkan's footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Behind him, Kesava carried scanning equipment and a portable light. Where are we going? Kesava asked. To see the weapons again, Vorkan said. I need to understand them better. They walked through narrow passages and down steep stairs. Everything about the ship felt cramped and uncomfortable. Vorkan was not a large being. but even he had to duck his head in some places. He tried to imagine living here for months or years. The thought made him feel trapped. They reached the gun turret. It was even more impressive from inside. The 3 massive barrels extended forward through thick armor. Behind them, machinery filled the room. Chains and gears for loading, hydraulics for aiming. Everything was mechanical, built to work even if the electronics failed. Vorkan approached the control panel. It was covered in switches and dials, all labeled in the human language. The computer in his suit translated the words for him. 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7, he read aloud. Projectile weight 1,200 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 760 meters per second. Maximum range 38 kilometers. Keseva made a sound of confusion. Those numbers seem small. Our plasma cannons can hit targets at 100,000 kilometers. Yes, Vorkan said, but consider the environment. This weapon was not meant for space combat. It was built for planetary warfare. On a world with atmosphere and gravity, these specifications are quite effective. He pulled up a calculation on his handheld device. A 1,200 kilogram projectile traveling at 760 meters per second has a kinetic energy of approximately 346 million joules. That is equivalent to about 82 kilograms of chemical explosives. Keseva's eyes widened. For each shot? For each shot. And this turret has 3 barrels. The ship has 3 turrets, 9 barrels total. Vorkan did more calculations. This ship could deliver over 3 billion joules of kinetic energy in a single salvo, every 30 seconds. That is excessive. That is human, Vorkan said quietly. They moved on, exploring deeper into the ship. They found the magazines where ammunition was stored. Massive shells lay in racks, each one taller than Vorkan. There were hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. The humans had built this ship to fight for a long time without resupply. Next, they found the crew quarters. Row after row of narrow beds stacked 3 high. Small lockers for personal items. A few faded pictures still hung on walls showing human faces. They were an odd species with only 2 eyes and strange flat faces. They looked soft compared to most spacefaring races. Yet these soft creatures had built this iron fortress. Vorkan stopped at one bunk and examined the space. How big are humans? He asked Keseva. Keseva checked his database. Average height is 1.7 meters. Mass is about 70 kilograms. Vorkan looked at the bed. It was barely long enough for a being that size. There was no room to move, no privacy. Over 2,000 of them lived on this ship, he said. In these conditions. For months at a time. They must have hated it, Keseva said. Perhaps, or perhaps they accepted it as the price of their mission. Vorkan moved to a small desk and found a journal there, its pages yellow with age. He carefully opened it and let his suit's computer scan the writing. The translation appeared on his display. It was a diary kept by someone named Johnson, an engineer who maintained the ship's engines. Vorkan read a few entries aloud. 15th day at sea. The weather is rough. Half the crew is seasick. But the old girl keeps going. She always does. He flipped ahead. Took fire today during bombardment run. 3 hits on the port side. The armor held. A few men shaken up but no serious injuries. Captain says we will be back on station tomorrow. Missouri does not quit. Keseva listened quietly. They sound almost affectionate toward the ship. They trusted it, Vorkan said. They knew it would protect them. That trust was earned through experience. They found the ship's main computer core next. It was primitive by modern standards, but still functional. Vorkan connected his equipment and began downloading the ship's complete history. Files appeared on his screen. Launch date, crew rosters, mission logs. The Missouri had been built in 1944, during something humans called World War II. It had fought in several major battles, survived direct hits from enemy weapons, and served for decades afterward. One file caught Vorkan's attention. It was labeled Battle Damage Report, Okinawa, 1945. He opened it and read carefully. The ship had been attacked by something called a kamikaze. A human translation program explained that this meant an enemy pilot who deliberately crashed his aircraft into ships. The Missouri had been hit directly. The kamikaze's aircraft had exploded against the armor. The damage report was brief. Minor dent in armor plating. Some paint scorched. No penetration, no casualties. Ship remained fully operational. An aircraft loaded with explosives had hit the ship directly, and the humans had described it as minor damage. Keseva. Vorkon said slowly. What would happen if a modern fighter craft crashed into one of our ships? Keseva thought about it. Our ships are not designed for such impacts. The collision would likely breach the hull. Depending on where it hit, it could destroy the ship. Vorkon nodded. That was what he had thought. He continued reading through the files. The Missouri had served in multiple wars across decades. Korea in the 1950s, the Persian Gulf in 1991. Each time it had fired its massive guns at targets on land, supporting troops, destroying fortifications. Each time it had come home intact. He found technical specifications for the armor. The main belt was over 300 millimeters of hardened steel. The deck armor was nearly 200 millimeters in places. The turrets were even thicker, with armor exceeding 400 millimeters. Do you know what interests me most? Vorkon said to Keseva. This ship was not unique. It was one of a class. The humans built multiple vessels like this. How many? Vorkon searched the files. The Iowa class consisted of 4 ships. But that was just one class. They built many classes of battleships over the years. Dozens of vessels, all following the same design philosophy. All this heavy armor. Yes, and that was just their ocean warships. They also built aircraft, tanks, fortifications, all designed the same way, heavy, durable, built to last. Keseva was quiet for a moment. It seems wasteful. All that material for protection instead of weapons or speed. It seems wasteful to us, Vorkon corrected. But think about it from their perspective. The humans lived on a single world. They could not run away from their enemies. They could not retreat into space. Every battle was final. Every defeat was catastrophic. So they built things that would not break. He pulled up an image from the files. It showed the Missouri firing all 9 of its main guns at once. The blast was enormous, fire and smoke erupting from the barrels. The ship itself was barely visible through the cloud of destruction it was creating. This is their answer to every problem, Vorkon said. Hit it harder. Make walls thicker. Never give up. Never break. They spent hours more exploring the ship. They found medical facilities designed to handle hundreds of casualties. They found damage control equipment meant to patch holes and fight fires. They found backup systems for the backup systems. Everything about the Missouri spoke of the same message. Prepare for the worst, and survive it. Finally, as they prepared to leave, Vorkon stopped in the main corridor one last time. He put his hand on the metal wall and felt the coldness of the steel through his suit. This ship is 300 years old, he said quietly. It uses technology we consider primitive. It moves slowly. It has no shields, no energy weapons, no artificial gravity. By every modern standard, it is obsolete. But, Keseva prompted. But I would not want to fight it, Vorkon admitted. Even now, even dead and abandoned, it is frightening. Because it represents something we have forgotten. The willingness to trade efficiency for survival. The acceptance that war is terrible and bloody, and the only way to win is to be tougher than your enemy. They left the ship and returned to the station. Vorkon went immediately to his quarters and began writing a report. He worked through the night, carefully documenting everything they had learned. The Missouri was not just a ship. It was a philosophy made physical. It showed how humans thought about conflict and survival, and if this was their thinking 300 years ago, when they were confined to a single world, what was their thinking now? The humans had achieved spaceflight. They had faster-than-light travel. They had fusion power and advanced computers. And somewhere out there, they were building ships using all that new technology, but still following the old philosophy. Ships that did not avoid damage. Ships that absorbed it. Ships that kept fighting no matter what. Vorkon finished his report as the station's artificial dawn began. He attached all the scans, all the files, all the data they had gathered. Then he sent it to the council with a priority flag. The subject line was simple. Humans. Immediate strategic assessment required. The war room of Zilthari High Command was a cold place. It sat deep beneath the surface of their homeworld, protected by layers of rock and defensive shields. The walls glowed with displays showing star charts and fleet positions. In the center, a large holographic table projected images that floated in the air. General Thexnor stood at the table, his 4 arms crossed behind his back. Around him, military analysts and strategic officers worked at their stations. The room hummed with quiet activity. Show me the human ship again, Thexnor commanded. The hologram changed. The image of the Missouri appeared, rotating slowly. The general walked around it, studying every angle. He had read Vorkon's report 3 times already. Each reading left him more disturbed. "This cannot be real," said Commander Velshara from her station. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly due to her skill with tactical simulations. "No one builds ships this way. Not anymore." "The evidence is clear," Thexnor replied. "The ship exists. The scans do not lie. But the implications," Velshara trailed off, "are troubling." "Yes." Thexnor touched the hologram, making it zoom in on the armor plating. 400 millimeters of hardened steel. "We could hit this with our plasma lances and barely scratch it. Surely our weapons are more advanced than what this ship faced?" "Are they?" Thexnor turned to face her. "Our plasma weapons work by superheating the target's hull. They are very effective against modern materials that melt or vaporize easily. But steel?" He shook his head. "Steel has been used as armor for thousands of years precisely because it resists heat so well." Another officer spoke up. "Even if the armor is strong, the ship is slow. We could simply outmaneuver it." "This ship is 300 years old," Thexnor reminded them. "We are not facing this ship. We are facing what the humans are building now, with modern technology." Silence fell over the room. That was the real question. The one that had been haunting Thexnor since he read the report. What would a human warship look like today? "Velshara," the general said. "Run a simulation. Start with the Missouri's basic design philosophy. Heavy armor, kinetic weapons, emphasis on durability. Now upgrade it. Give it modern power systems, modern materials, modern propulsion. What do you get?" Velshara turned to her console and began working. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Numbers scrolled across screens. The other analysts gathered around to watch. "This will take some time," she said. "I need to make assumptions about human technology levels." "Use our own technology as a baseline," Thexnor ordered. "If they have achieved faster than light travel, they must have similar capabilities to us." The simulation ran. Velshara built a theoretical human warship piece by piece. She started with the hull. If the Missouri used steel, what would a modern human ship use? Probably titanium alloys or carbon composites. Lighter than steel but stronger. She calculated armor thickness based on maintaining the Missouri's protective ratio. "I am showing armor plating of at least 200 millimeters of advanced composites," she reported, possibly backed by additional layers of ceramic or reactive materials. "What would that stop?" Thexnor asked. Velshara ran impact simulations. "Our standard plasma lances would need sustained fire to penetrate. Maybe 30 seconds of continuous hits on the same spot. Our missiles?" She paused, checking the numbers. "Most of our missiles would detonate on the surface without reaching the interior." "What about multiple hits? Concentrated fire? That would work. Eventually. But this is assuming the ship just sits there and takes it. If they have point defense systems, our missiles might not even reach the hull." Thexnor nodded slowly. "Continue. Add weapons." Velshara moved to the weapon systems. The Missouri used gunpowder to launch metal shells. Primitive but effective. Modern humans would use something better. Railguns, probably. Electromagnetic launchers that could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. "If they follow the same philosophy," she said, "they would use kinetic weapons. Railguns firing dense metal slugs. At near relativistic speeds, the kinetic energy would be—" She stopped, staring at her screen. "How much?" Thexnor demanded. "More than our plasma lances, much more. A single hit could penetrate our ships completely. Entrance hole and exit hole with everything in between destroyed." The room grew quieter. Several officers exchanged worried glances. "What about defense?" someone asked. "Surely they have shields." Velshara added shield generators to her simulation. "Probably. But given their philosophy, I expect their shields to be supplemental rather than primary defense. The armor is primary. The shields just reduce damage before it reaches the armor." "That is backwards," Commander Felton said. "We rely on shields first. When they fail, we use evasive maneuvers. Armor is our last resort." "Which means we are fragile compared to them," Thexnor said bluntly. "Our ships are fast and well armed. But if something gets through our defenses, we are crippled or destroyed. Human ships would just keep fighting." He paced around the holographic table. "What else? Give me the full picture." Velshara continued building her simulation. She added engines, powerful fusion drives that could move the massive armored hull. She added reactors, multiple redundant power systems like the backup systems they had found on the Missouri. She added crew quarters, probably still cramped but better than the ancient ship. The final product appeared on the holographic display. It was a monster, twice the size of a standard Zilthari cruiser, heavy armor wrapped around every surface. Multiple weapon turrets bristled from the hull. Engine pods larger than some entire ships jutted from the rear. "This is what I project a human heavy cruiser would look like," Velshara said quietly. Everyone in the room stared at the image. "How many of these could we destroy?" Thexnor asked. "If we had to fight one, how would we win?" Velshara ran a battle simulation. She placed one human ship against a standard Zilthari battle group. 5 cruisers, 10 destroyers, 20 fighters. The simulation began. The holographic battle played out in fast motion. The Zilthari fleet opened fire from long range. Plasma lances and missiles crossed the distance. The human ship's shields flared, absorbing some impacts. Others hit the armor and scorched it but did not penetrate. The human ship kept coming, accelerating toward the Zilthari fleet. When it reached firing range, the simulation showed the human weapons opening up. Railgun fire tore through space at incredible velocities. The first volley destroyed 3 Zilthari cruisers, punching clean through their shields and hulls. The second volley crippled 2 more. The Zilthari fighters swarmed the human ship, firing their light weapons. They might as well have been throwing rocks. The armor ignored them. Point defense systems picked off the fighters one by one. The simulation ended with the human ship damaged but functional. The Zilthari battle group was scattered wreckage. "Run it again," Thexnor ordered, his voice tight. "Give us better tactics. Hit and run attacks. Use our speed advantage." Velshara ran the simulation again. This time the Zilthari fleet stayed at long range, darting into fire and then retreating. It worked better. They destroyed the human ship eventually, but it took 3 times as many ships. And the human vessel took half of them down before it died. "This is just one ship," Felton said, sounding shaken. "How many do they have?" Thexnor turned to his intelligence officer. "Check the first contact records. How many ships did the humans bring when they approached the council?" The officer checked his database. 12 vessels were detected. They called them diplomatic escorts. Diplomatic escorts. Thexnor laughed bitterly. "Show me the scan records from that encounter." The intelligence officer pulled up files from 18 months ago. When the humans first made contact with the Galactic Council, they had arrived at the border and requested a meeting. Council ships had approached and performed standard scans. Thexnor read through the reports. At the time, the Council analyst had noted the human ship seemed inefficient. Heavy construction, oversized reactors, armor that seemed excessive for civilian vessels. The Council had assumed the humans were simply less advanced, making up for technological gaps with brute force engineering. Now those same reports looked different. Now they looked like warnings that no one had heeded. "They brought 12 warships to a diplomatic meeting," Thexnor said slowly, "and we smiled and nodded and did not realize what we were seeing. Should we contact the Council?" Velshara asked. "The Council is debating trade agreements and cultural exchanges." Thexnor replied, "They do not want to hear about military threats. Not from a species that seems so primitive." He looked at the hologram of Velshara's theoretical human ship. It looked brutal. It looked unstoppable, and it was only a guess. The real ships might be worse. "Find out everything we can about human space forces," Thexnor ordered. "Ships, bases, fleet deployments. I want to know what we are dealing with." "That information may not be available," the intelligence officer said carefully. "The humans have shared little military data, then make assumptions. Educated guesses. But I need to know what our fleet would face if we ever went to war with these people." The intelligence officer nodded and left to begin his work. Thexnor remained in the war room, staring at the hologram. He thought about the Missouri, that ancient ship drifting in space. Vorkan had not slept well in days. His quarters on the research station felt too quiet, too empty. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Missouri floating in space like a warning no one understood. He had been requested to travel to the Council archives on the Capital World. The message said General Thexnor wanted him to examine the first contact records. Vorkan agreed immediately. He had questions that needed answers. The journey took 3 days. Vorkan spent the time reviewing everything he knew about humans. It was not much. The species had appeared on the galactic stage only 18 months ago. They had been polite, professional, and unremarkable. The Council had filed their application for membership and moved on to more pressing matters. The Council archives were impressive. A massive building on the capital world, filled with thousands of years of history. Records from every species in the Council. Treaties, laws, first contact reports, everything carefully preserved and catalogued. A Syntheri archivist met Vorkan at the entrance. Her name was Sorath, and she seemed excited to have a researcher visiting. "We rarely get scientists here," she said as she led him through marble hallways. "Most people access the archives remotely. What brings you to visit in person?" "I need to see files that may have been overlooked," Vorkan explained. "Sometimes context is lost in digital records." Sorath nodded wisely. "You are correct. There is knowledge in seeing the original documents and holding them in your hands." She led him to a private study room. The walls were lined with data terminals. A comfortable chair sat before a large screen. On the table was a cup of warm tea, steam rising from its surface. "The human first contact files are loaded and ready," Sorath said. "If you need anything else, just call for me." Vorkan thanked her and sat down. He sipped the tea, gathering his thoughts, then activated the terminal. The first file was a date stamp. 18 months ago, 312 days to be exact. The location was the Outer Rim, near a system humans called Alpha Centauri. Council patrol ships had detected unusual faster-than-light signatures. They had gone to investigate. Vorkan opened the ship logs. Captain Mintar of the Council vessel Brightwing had written the initial report. "We encountered 12 unknown vessels today. They were waiting at the edge of the system, maintaining a stationary position. When we approached, they broadcast a greeting in several languages. None matched our databases, so we responded with standard first contact protocols. They replied within minutes. Their translation computers were impressive." Vorkan continued reading. "The unknown vessels identified themselves as representing the human species from a world called Earth. They expressed interest in opening diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. I invited their leaders to meet aboard Brightwing. They declined, asking if we would meet aboard one of their ships instead. I agreed." Vorkan paused. "That was interesting. The humans had not wanted Council representatives on their ships?" No, he reread the passage. "The humans had not wanted to come to the Council ship. They preferred to host." That spoke of either confidence or caution. He found Captain Mintar's description of visiting the human vessel. "We docked with their flagship. It was much larger than I expected. The hull appeared extremely robust. Our sensors had difficulty penetrating it to scan the interior. When we entered, we were greeted by a human who introduced herself as Ambassador Chen. She was courteous and professional. The ship's interior was surprisingly spacious compared to the exterior hull thickness. There, hull thickness. Even 18 months ago, that detail had been noted. But no one had understood its significance. Vorkan opened the technical scans from that encounter. The Council ships had performed standard sensor sweeps of the human vessels. The results were marked as anomalous in several places. He read through the notes. Excessive structural reinforcement. Power output suggests military-grade reactors. Weapon systems detected but not identified. Armor composition resists standard scanning frequencies. And then, at the bottom of the report, a comment from the scanning officer. Design philosophy appears inefficient, but functional. Possibly indicates limited material science or compensating for technological gaps. Vorkan wanted to scream. The clues had been there, right from the beginning, but everyone had looked at the humans and seen a primitive species trying their best with limited knowledge. No one had considered that the humans might have designed their ships exactly the way they wanted them. He pulled up footage from the first meeting. The Council kept video records of all first contact events. Vorkan watched as Captain Mintar and his staff entered the human ship. The humans were smaller than most Council species. They looked almost fragile with their soft skin and small frames. Ambassador Chen was particularly slight, barely reaching Mintar's shoulder. She wore a formal suit and smiled frequently, but behind her Vorkan noticed the ship's crew. They wore uniforms that looked military in style. Dark colors, clean lines, patches on their shoulders showing ranks and positions. They moved with discipline and precision. This was not a civilian vessel. It was a warship pretending to be diplomatic. Vorkan fast-forwarded through the meeting. Ambassador Chen presented a formal request for opening relations. She explained that humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They had been exploring nearby systems and had recently learned about the Galactic Council. They were excited to join the greater community. The presentation was perfect. Humble but confident, requesting guidance but offering knowledge in return. Exactly what the council wanted to hear from a new species. Mintar had been impressed. His log entries praised the humans for their diplomatic skills and willingness to learn. He recommended accepting their application for membership. Vorkon closed that file and opened another. This one was a summary of human culture, prepared by council anthropologists. They had studied the radio and internet signals coming from Earth, learning about human history and society. The report was hundreds of pages long. Vorkon skimmed through it looking for anything relevant. He found a section on human military history. It was brief, only a few paragraphs. The anthropologist who wrote it had noted that humans seemed unusually warlike compared to most species. They had fought thousands of wars throughout their history. Major conflicts had involved hundreds of millions of combatants. The anthropologist had concluded that humanity was still in a primitive stage of social development. They would probably mature and become more peaceful once they integrated with the council. Vorkon closed his 4 eyes in frustration. The anthropologist had seen the data and drawn exactly the wrong conclusion. Humans were not primitively warlike. They were experienced. They had thousands of years of practice at warfare. They knew what worked and what did not. He opened another file. This one contained images of human settlements. The council had used long-range telescopes to observe Earth and its colonies. Vorkon zoomed in on Earth itself. It was a beautiful world, blue and green and white. Cities covered large areas. Orbital stations dotted the space around it. Everything looked peaceful and advanced, but then he looked closer. The cities had defensive walls. The orbital stations had armor plating. Even civilian transports showed signs of reinforced construction. He pulled up images of human colonies on other worlds. Mars, Luna, various moons of the outer planets. Every settlement showed the same pattern. Heavy construction, defensive positions, backup systems. The humans built everything as if they expected to be attacked at any moment. Vorkon found a file, marked human commercial vessels. The council had scanned several human cargo ships during their first months of contact. These were not military ships, just merchants, traders, civilian transports. The scans showed reinforced hulls, emergency bulkheads, redundant life support. One cargo ship had armor plating that would be excessive even on a military vessel. When council officials asked about this, the human captain had seemed confused by the question. "Space is dangerous," he had said simply. "Why would not we protect our people?" Vorkon sat back in his chair. The picture was becoming clear. Humans did not think like other species. They did not divide their world into military and civilian, safe and dangerous. Everything was potentially dangerous. Everything needed protection. This was not paranoia. This was learned behavior. Humans had evolved on a world where danger was constant. Predators, natural disasters, disease, and most of all each other. They had survived by being tough and prepared. Then they had gone to space, and they had taken that mindset with them. He found a personnel file that made him pause. It showed the crew roster for one of the human diplomatic vessels. Over 800 people on a single ship. Vorkon compared it to the size of the vessel. The ship was large, but not that large. 800 people meant it was crowded. The humans were packing their ships with crew the same way they had packed the Missouri. Maximizing capability even at the cost of comfort. But why so many people? Vorkon checked the crew positions. Engineers, technicians, medical staff, damage control teams. Far more than a normal ship would need, unless the ship expected to take damage, unless it expected casualties, unless it planned to keep fighting even when things went wrong. Vorkon found a conversation recording that had been flagged as unusual. A council diplomat had asked a human officer why their ships carried so many weapons. The human had looked, surprised by the quest Emperor Kael'tos of the Shilthari Empire stood before the massive window of his throne room and looked at the stars. His empire stretched across 12 systems. His fleets numbered over 500 warships. He was the most powerful ruler in this sector of the galaxy, and he was about to start a war. "Your Majesty," General Thexner said from behind him, "the Council has rejected our territorial claims. They insist the disputed systems belong to them." "The Council is weak," Kael'tos said without turning. "They talk and debate while we act. Those systems are ours by right of strength. The Council will fight. Let them. Our fleet is superior. We will crush their defenses in a matter of weeks. Thexnor hesitated. Your Majesty, I must again voice my concerns about the humans. If the Council calls for aid, the humans are not our concern. Keltos turned to face his general. They are new to this galaxy. They have no alliances, no obligations to the Council. They will stay neutral. But if they do not, then we destroy them as well. The Emperor walked to his throne and sat down. I have read your reports, Thexnor. You worry too much about one old ship. The humans may have tough vessels, but we have numbers. We have experience. We have the will to dominate. Thexnor said nothing. He had tried to warn the Emperor. He had shown him the simulations, the projections, the analysis. But Keltos saw only an opportunity to expand the Empire. He would not be dissuaded. Begin the offensive, Keltos commanded. Strike their border stations at dawn. Show the Council what happens to those who deny us. Thexnor bowed and left the throne room. His hearts were heavy. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought in a dozen wars, and he had never felt this sense of approaching doom before. The Silthari fleet launched its attack the next morning. 300 warships crossed into Council space and opened fire on the defense stations. Plasma lances lit up the darkness. Missiles streaked toward their targets. Within hours, 6 Council stations were destroyed or crippled. The Council's response was immediate. They activated their defense treaties and called up their reserves. They also sent out a call for help to their allies and trading partners, including humanity. Vorkon was back at his research station when he heard the news. War had started. The Silthari had made their move. The Council was fighting back but taking heavy losses, and humanity had responded to the call for help. They are sending ships, Kesava told him, reading the message that had just arrived. 12 vessels, the same number they brought to first contact. 12. Vorkon felt a chill run through his body. Only 12 to face 300 Silthari warships? Perhaps they do not understand the scale of the conflict. Or perhaps, Vorkon said slowly, they think 12 is enough. The human fleet arrived 4 days later. They came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Silthari home system. Their appearance caused immediate chaos in the Empire's command center. Unknown ships detected. A sensor operator called out. 12 contacts. They matched the human vessel signatures from first contact. General Thexnor rushed to the command center. He looked at the display showing the 12 human ships. They were larger than he remembered. Much larger. Get me visual, he ordered. The screen showed the human fleet. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small space station. They were dark gray, almost black, with hulls that looked like they were carved from solid metal. Weapon turrets dotted every surface. Engine pods glowed with intense blue light. They looked like the Missouri, but built by gods instead of mortals. They are heading toward us, the sensor operator reported. Speed is moderate. They are not attempting evasive patterns. Are they scanning us? Yes, sir. Active sensor sweeps across our entire fleet. Thexnor felt his mouth go dry. Send them a message. Tell them this conflict is not their concern. Tell them to withdraw. The communications officer worked quickly. A moment later, they are responding. A human face appeared on the screen. A male older with gray hair and hard eyes. He wore a dark uniform with symbols on the collar. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Space Navy. The Galactic Council has requested our assistance in defending against your aggression. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces. Stand down now, or we will make you stand down. Thexnor stared at the human. Admiral Chen did not look scared or uncertain. He looked like a man stating a simple fact. They have 12 ships, someone whispered. We have over 200 in this system alone. Fire a warning shot, Emperor Keltos commanded. He had arrived in the command center and was watching the display. Show them what happens to those who threaten us. Your Majesty, Thexnor began, but the Emperor cut him off. Fire. The weapons officer hesitated, then obeyed. A plasma lance from the nearest Silthari battleship fired across the distance. It was a light shot, meant to frighten rather than destroy. The beam struck the lead human ship directly on its forward section. The human ship's shields flared, a brief shimmer of energy. The plasma beam hit the armor beneath. There was a flash of heat. A small scorch mark appeared on the hull. The human ship did not slow down. It did not change course. It kept coming. They are increasing speed, the sensor operator reported. All 12 ships accelerating toward our fleet. Fire again, Keltos ordered. Full weapons. All ships in range, the Zilthari fleet opened fire. Dozens of ships launched everything they had. Plasma lances, particle beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. The human ships pushed through it like ships sailing through rain. Their shields absorbed some hits. Their armor took the rest. Scorch marks covered their hulls. Sections glowed red with heat. But they did not stop. They did not break apart. They just kept coming. Why are they not dying? Kael'tos shouted. Thexanor watched in horror as his predictions came true. The human ships were doing exactly what he had feared. They were absorbing damage that would destroy any normal vessel. They are entering their firing range, the sensor operator said, his voice shaking. The human ships opened fire. Thexanor had seen many weapons in his military career. He thought he had seen the worst that war could offer. He was wrong. The human railguns fired. There was no flash, no visible beam, just metal slugs accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance in fractions of a second. The first Zilthari battleship simply came apart. One moment it was there firing its weapons. The next moment a railgun slug passed completely through it from bow to stern. The ship's structure failed. It broke into 3 pieces, atmosphere and debris spraying into space. The second and third battleships died the same way. Clean hits that punched through shields and armor like they were made of paper. Evasive maneuvers. Thexanor screamed into the communication system. All ships scatter. The Zilthari fleet tried to disperse. They were fast ships built for speed and maneuverability. But speed did not matter when the enemy's weapons traveled at near light speed. There was no time to dodge. By the time you saw the shot coming, you were already dead. The human ships moved through the Zilthari fleet like predators through prey. Their weapons fired continuously. Railguns tore through ship after ship. Missile launchers added to the destruction, sending smart munitions that tracked fleeing vessels and detonated with devastating force. The Zilthari fought back. They concentrated their fire on individual human ships, pouring everything they had into overwhelming the defenses. It worked partially. One human ship lost its shields entirely. Its armor was breached in multiple places. Atmosphere vented from the wounds, but it kept fighting. Its weapons never stopped firing. Even damaged, even bleeding air and fire, it continued to destroy Zilthari ships. Retreat, Thexanor ordered. All ships fall back to the defensive ring. What was left of the fleet tried to withdraw. Less than half made it. The human ships pursued, their weapons reaching out across vast distances to find targets. Emperor Kael'tos stood frozen, watching his fleet die. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We outnumbered them 20 to 1. Numbers do not matter if you cannot damage the enemy," Thexanor said bitterly. "I tried to tell you. The humans do not fight like we do. They built their ships to take hits, to survive, to keep fighting no matter what." On the display, the human ships were forming a new formation. They had stopped pursuing and were holding position. The message was clear. They could destroy the rest of the fleet whenever they wanted. They were choosing to wait. Admiral Chen appeared on the screen again. "This is your final warning. Withdraw all forces from Council space. End your offensive. If you do not comply within 1 hour, we will resume fire. And this time we will not stop until your fleet is completely destroyed." Kael'tos looked at Thexanor. For the first time, the Emperor's confidence was gone. He looked old and scared. "How many ships did we lose?" "Over 150, Thexanor replied. "In less than 20 minutes. And they lost?" "None. One is damaged but still functional." The Emperor sat down heavily. "How is this possible? We are the dominant military power in this region. We have the best ships, the best weapons." "We have fast ships," Thexanor corrected. "Light ships. Ships built to avoid damage. The humans have ships built to endure it. When we fight, we try to destroy the—" It meant flying the massive colony ships directly to the play. The dying star of Lumina Prime began its final death throes 2 weeks ahead of all scientific predictions. Massive solar flares erupted from its surface, sending waves of deadly radiation across the planet. The crystal cities that had stood for millions of years started to crack and sing discordant songs of pain, as the stellar energy tore through their delicate structures. In the deep underground chambers, engineer Kim Sungmin worked desperately to keep the evacuation tunnels stable. His human engineering tools hummed alongside Valari crystal singers who shaped the living stone with their harmonics. Every few minutes another tremor would shake the tunnels, threatening to bury millions of refugees. "The resonance is becoming chaotic," sang Harmony, Keeper of Depths, one of the Valari engineers working with Sungmin's team. "The star's death song is drowning out our ability to sing the crystals into safety." Sungmin wiped sweat from his forehead as he recalibrated another structural support beam. "Then we'll have to hold them up the hard way. How many more evacuation groups are waiting down here?" 7 crystal chambers," the Valari replied, her harmonic voice trembling with exhaustion. "Nearly 2 million of our people shelter in the deep places." Above ground, the evacuation continued at a frantic pace. The massive colony ship New Hope had landed directly in Crystal City 1, its cargo bays converted into temporary Valari habitats. Captain Park Soo-jin coordinated the boarding operation from her ship's medical bay, watching thousands of crystalline beings flow into the evacuation vessels like living rivers of light. "Medical team to Bay 7, she announced over the ship's communication system. "We have injured Valari coming aboard. Dr. Seo Eunjung, your expertise is needed." Dr. Eunjung had become the fleet's leading expert on Valari physiology through weeks of emergency treatment. Her gentle touch and calm demeanor had earned the trust of the frightened refugees, who had never been treated by alien medics before. The young Valari she was treating now had been injured when part of his crystal home collapsed during a stellar flare. His arm was fractured, and the light that normally flowed through his crystalline body was flickering weakly. "Your healing harmonics are very soothing," the Valari sang softly as Eunjung worked to stabilize his injured limb. "Do all humans possess such gift songs?" "We call it compassion," Eunjung replied through her translation device. "And yes, most of us have it. That's why we're here." But even as the evacuation proceeded, the Thrakari fleet maintained its blockade. General Krex had received reinforcements from the Empire's home fleet, another 60 warships that brought his total force to over 100 vessels. His patience with the human rescue mission had completely run out. "Human Admiral," Krex's voice boomed across all communication frequencies, "you have violated Thrakari space, ignored our lawful orders, and interfered with the natural order of galactic evolution. Your ships will withdraw immediately, or we will destroy them all." Admiral Nam Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of Seoul's Pride, watching tactical displays that showed Thrakari ships moving into attack formation. Around the planet, human evacuation vessels were completely vulnerable, their shields down and cargo bays open to receive refugees. "General Krex," he replied, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "We are conducting a humanitarian rescue operation. These people are innocent civilians facing extinction. Stand down your weapons and let us save them." "The weak deserve their fate," Krex responded. "The Thrakari Empire will not permit your species to interfere with galactic natural selection. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal, or we open fire." In the fighter squadrons scattered throughout the human fleet, pilots like Lim Dong-yuk prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. His small fighter was no match for a Thrakari battlecruiser, but he and his squadron mates had volunteered to buy time for the evacuation ships. "Phoenix Squadron. This is Phoenix Leader," he transmitted to his pilots. "Remember, we're not here to win a war. We're here to give those evacuation ships every extra minute we can. Make every shot count." The hour passed quickly. Across the planet's surface, human and allied teams worked frantically to load more Valari onto the evacuation ships. They had managed to save 12 million so far, but 28 million remained on the dying world. When the deadline expired, General Krex kept his word. The Thrakari fleet opened fire with devastating precision, targeting the human military escorts while avoiding the civilian evacuation vessels. They wanted to disable the human fleet's ability to fight back, then force the evacuation ships to withdraw empty. The Battle of Lumina Prime began with a thunderous exchange of energy weapons that lit up the space around the planet. Human destroyers and cruisers, outnumbered 5-1, spread out to protect the vulnerable colony ships on the surface. Captain Park Soo-jin watched the battle from the Bridge of Persistence as energy beams flashed overhead. Her ship was still loading refugees, but she could see that the human escorts were being overwhelmed. Thrakari vessels were breaking through the defensive lines, heading directly for the evacuation ships. "All hands prepare for emergency launch," she announced. "We're taking off with whoever we have aboard." But as she prepared to lift off, thousands more Valari streamed toward her ship from the crystal cities. They were running from their homes as the underground chambers collapsed, carrying their children and their few remaining possessions. How could she leave them behind? "Captain," called her navigation officer, Lieutenant Kim Hyun-soo. "Thrakari battlecruiser Thunder of War is on direct approach. ETA 4 minutes." Park Soo-jin looked at the tactical display, then at the crowds of refugees still boarding her ship. She made a decision that would be remembered for generations. "Mr. Kim, plot an intercept course for that battlecruiser." "Captain, you heard me. If they want to stop this evacuation, they'll have to go through us first." The research vessel Persistence was not built for combat. It was a scientific ship converted for medical work, with minimal weapons and shields. But as it lifted off from Lumina Prime and accelerated toward the massive Thrakari warship, it carried something more powerful than weapons: the absolute determination to protect innocent lives. Captain Park Soo-jin opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "This is Captain Park Soo-jin of the Persistence. They want to call this natural selection? Let me show them what human evolution looks like." Her ship struck the Thunder of War amidships at maximum velocity. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface, a brilliant flash that temporarily outshone the dying star. The Thrakari battlecruiser was crippled, spinning out of control, while the Persistence was completely destroyed. But Captain Park's sacrifice had an unexpected effect. Across the human fleet, other ships began following her example. Cargo vessels rammed Thrakari destroyers. Medical ships used their landing craft as improvised missiles. Even the massive colony ships turned their bulk into weapons, using their reinforced hulls to crush smaller enemy vessels. The Thrakari had expected a conventional space battle, with both sides exchanging fire at long range until one fleet was defeated. They were not prepared for an enemy that treated every ship as expendable if it meant protecting the evacuation. Admiral Nam Hyun-woo watched his fleet sacrifice itself ship by ship and felt pride warring with grief in his chest. These were good people, volunteers who had left their homes and families to save strangers. Now they were dying to give those strangers a few more minutes of life. But just when the situation seemed hopeless, salvation came from an unexpected direction. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy, not just the Allied vessels that had joined the rescue convoy, but new arrivals drawn by news of the battle. The crystalline architects sent their most powerful warships, massive vessels of living crystal that could harmonize with Valari technology. A rebel faction of Nexus Syndicate ships arrived with heavy cruisers and battle platforms. Most surprisingly, several squadrons of young Thrakari officers arrived, their ships painted with human and Valari symbols. "This is Commander Thek of the Thrakari vessel Honor's Edge," came a transmission from one of the defecting ships. "We refuse to participate in this slaughter of innocents. The Empire does not speak for all Thrakari." For the first time in galactic history, a battle was being fought not between species or nations, but between two philosophies: those who believed in protecting the weak and those who thought only the strong deserved to survive. The arrival of reinforcements shifted the balance of the battle, but it also escalated the conflict. General Krex, facing mutiny in his own ranks and defeat by a coalition of lesser species, made a desperate decision. If he couldn't stop the evacuation by defeating the rescue fleet, he would destroy the planet itself. "All ships target the planet's surface," he ordered his remaining loyal vessels. "If we cannot prevent this contamination of galactic natural order, we will ensure it ends here." The Thrakari fleet began bombarding Lumina Prime directly, targeting the crystal cities where millions of Valari still waited for evacuation. The beautiful structures that had survived for millions of years began to collapse under the assault, their harmonic songs becoming screams of destruction. In the deep tunnels, Engineer Kim Sung-min felt the bombardment through the planet's crust. The Thrakari energy weapons were causing massive. The surface of Lumina Prime shook violently as another massive quake tore through the crystal cities. Deep underground, in the ancient refuge chambers carved from living stone, millions of Valari huddled together and sang songs of fear and hope. Their harmonies echoed through the tunnels, creating a symphony of survival that had never been heard before. Dawn pressed her crystalline hands against the chamber wall, feeling the vibrations of the dying planet through her entire body. Above them, she knew the human ships had arrived, but the Thrakari fleet blocked any chance of rescue. Time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Bae Taeyong had never managed an evacuation before, but he was learning quickly. As emergency rescue coordinator for the human fleet, his job was to organize the most complex rescue operation in galactic history. He stood in the command center of the colony ship New Hope, surrounded by displays showing the planet's deteriorating condition. "The seismic activity is increasing," reported Dr. Young Soo-young, the fleet's atmospheric systems specialist. "The planet's crust is becoming unstable. Some of the deeper refuge chambers are already collapsing." Tae-young studied the maps of Valari cities, trying to calculate how many ships they would need for each location. The numbers were terrifying. Even if they could get past the Thrakari blockade, they had only 8 weeks to evacuate 40 million people from a planet that was tearing itself apart. "What about the crystal caves near the southern pole?" he asked. "Cut off by lava flows 3 days ago," Jung Soo-young replied. "We estimate 2 million Valari are trapped there with no surface access." The rescue coordinator felt the weight of impossible decisions. Every choice meant saving some people while abandoning others. He had never imagined that saving lives could be so brutal. On the bridge of Seoul's Pride, Admiral Nam Hyun-woo faced his own impossible situation. The Thrakari fleet had positioned itself in a perfect defensive formation around Lumina Prime. Any attempt to reach the planet would result in a devastating battle that the human fleet couldn't win. "General," Krex's latest message was playing on repeat. "Human Commander, you have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from this system. After that, any vessel approaching the planet will be destroyed. The Thrakari Empire will not allow this illegal intervention to continue." "Admiral," called Communications Officer Han Min-seok, "I'm receiving harmonic transmissions from the planet's surface. The Valari are trying to contact us directly." The bridge speakers filled with crystalline music unlike anything the humans had ever heard. Han Min-seok had spent months learning Valari harmonic language, and his translation device converted the alien songs into words the crew could understand. "Human ships, we sing gratitude for your arrival. But we understand if you must leave, we do not wish you to die for our sake. Your attempt alone honors us." The message hit every person on the bridge like a physical blow. Here were 40 million people facing extinction, and they were worried about their rescuers' safety. Admiral Nam Hyun-woo felt something harden in his chest, a determination that went beyond military duty. "Mr. Han," he said quietly, "send a message back. Tell them we didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." The human fleet began moving toward the planet, spreading out into evacuation formation despite the Thrakari blockade. The civilian ships stayed in the center while the military escorts formed a protective screen around them. Every captain knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but none of them suggested retreat. Dr. Jung Soo-young worked frantically to coordinate with Valari engineers on the surface. The rescue operation required perfect timing and cooperation between completely different technologies. Human atmospheric processors had to synchronize with Valari crystal singing to create safe boarding environments. "The crystal cities are resonating at dangerous frequencies," she reported to Bai Tae-young. "The dying star is affecting the planetary harmonics. If we don't stabilize the evacuation zones, the boarding process could kill the Valari we're trying to save." Tae-young made another impossible decision. "Redirect atmospheric teams to the most unstable areas first. We save who we can, where we can." The first evacuation shuttles launched from the human fleet, racing toward the planet's surface. They carried teams of engineers and medics who would set up emergency evacuation points in the crystal cities. It was dangerous work. The planet's surface was being bombarded by increasingly violent solar flares from the dying star. Captain Yoon Jae-hyun piloted one of the lead shuttles, his small craft loaded with emergency atmospheric equipment. Behind him sat a mixed team of humans and friendly aliens, all volunteers for the most dangerous part of the mission. "Shuttle Dawn's light to Fleet Command," he reported as they entered the planet's atmosphere. "Beginning descent to Crystal City 7. Visibility is poor due to stellar radiation, but we're still on course." The city appeared through the swirling dust and energy storms, a magnificent structure of living crystal that sang even as it slowly cracked apart. Massive spires reached toward the sky, connected by bridges of pure light that flickered and sparked with the planet's death throes. Jae-hyun set his shuttle down in the city's central plaza, where thousands of Valari waited in perfect harmonic formation. Their songs rose into the toxic air, creating a dome of organized sound that provided some protection from the stellar radiation. The Evacuation team worked quickly to set up atmospheric processors that could create safe zones for human-Volari interaction. The Volari had never seen humans up close before, and their initial fear was obvious in the discordant notes that crept into their harmonies. But when the first human medic, Dr. Seo Eunjung, successfully treated a young Volari injured by falling crystal debris, the fear began to change into something else. The Volari had spent their entire history believing they were too different from other species to form meaningful connections. These strange, soft-bodied creatures proved them wrong. "Your healing songs are different from ours," Dawn observed as she watched Dr. Eunjung work. "But they carry the same intent." "Music is universal," Eunjung replied through her translation device. "Whether it's made with voices or medical scanners." Above the planet, the standoff continued. The Thrakari fleet maintained their blockade, while more human shuttles launched toward the surface. General Krex was growing impatient with the humans' refusal to withdraw, but his orders were specific. Don't fire unless the humans directly challenge the blockade. The rescue operation created a strange stalemate. Human ships could reach the planet's surface through gaps in the Thrakari formation, but any large-scale evacuation would require bringing the colony ships much closer to Lumina Prime. That would force a direct confrontation. Engineer Kim Sungmin found himself in one of the most dangerous positions of the entire operation. His team was working in the deep crystal mines where millions of Volari had taken shelter from the surface storms. The tunnels were incredibly beautiful but terrifyingly unstable. "The resonance patterns are all wrong," he reported to the surface teams. "The stellar radiation is causing harmonic interference. The tunnel walls could collapse at any moment." Working with Volari crystal singers, Sungmin's team tried to stabilize the underground chambers long enough for evacuation. It required a perfect blend of human engineering and Volari harmonic technology. The humans provided structural supports while the Volari sang the crystals into stable configurations. But time was their enemy. Every hour brought new collapses, new groups of Volari cut off from evacuation points. Sungmin watched his team work with desperate efficiency, knowing that each tunnel they stabilized might be the difference between life and death for thousands of people. Communications. Officer Han Min-seok had become the primary liaison between the human fleet and the Volari population. His mastery of harmonic language allowed him to coordinate between dozens of evacuation sites simultaneously. He listened to the crystal cities singing their desperate songs and translated them into tactical information for the rescue teams. Crystal City 3 reports successful atmospheric integration, he announced to the Fleet Command Center. They're ready to begin boarding operations. Crystal City 12 has lost contact, came another report. Seismic activity has cut off their communication spires. Each update brought good news and bad news in equal measure. The evacuation was proceeding, but not fast enough. At their current rate, they could save perhaps 10 million Volari before the star exploded. That left 30 million facing certain death. Dr. Jung Soo-young worked around the clock to improve the evacuation process. She had designed atmospheric systems that could support both humans and Volari, but the boarding procedures were still slow and dangerous. Each Volari had to be carefully transported from their crystal environment to the ship's artificial atmosphere without shock or injury. "What if we don't transport them?" she suddenly asked Bae Tae-young during one of their planning sessions. "What do you mean?" "What if we bring their environment with us? Instead of making the Volari adapt to our ships, we make our ships adapt to them." It was a radical idea. Instead of individual evacuation, they could transport entire crystal chambers with their populations intact. It would require massive engineering modifications to the colony ships, but it might allow them to save far more Volari in much less time. The plan was brilliant, but dangerous. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Humanity would not do nothing. They were the human fleet launched from Luna Station on a cold Tuesday morning. Admiral Nam Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul's Pride, watching 200 ships spread out across space like a constellation of hope. Each vessel carried specialized equipment, supplies, and crew members who had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. The journey to Volari space would take 8 months through the most dangerous part of the galaxy. No major shipping routes passed through that region, and pirates often used the empty systems as hiding places. Worse, the route passed close to Thrakari military zones, where human ships would not be welcome. Captain Park Sujin commanded the Persistence, a research vessel converted into a mobile hospital. Her medical bay was equipped to treat both human and Velari injuries, though they had never actually worked on a living Velari before. Everything they knew came from medical scans and theoretical studies. "Captain," called her communications officer. "Ensign Minwu, we're receiving a transmission from Lumina Prime." The main screen flickered, showing the crystal chamber where Wisdom Keeper of Memory waited. The old Velari's harmonic voice filled the bridge, translated by their newest piece of technology, a communication device built by Dr. Shin Minji, Earth's first expert in Velari language, human vessels, the Velari elder sang. "We did not expect, we did not dare hope. How can we thank you for this gift?" Park Sujin smiled, even though she knew he probably couldn't interpret human facial expressions. "We're not there yet, Wisdom Keeper. But we're coming. Tell your people to prepare for evacuation." The first weeks of the journey passed without major problems. The fleet made good time and the crews settled into their routines. But as they entered the lawless regions between civilized space, trouble began to find them. Yoon Jae-hyun piloted the scout ship Dawn's Light, one of the fastest vessels in the human fleet. His job was to scout ahead for dangers and report back to Admiral Nam Hyunwoo. He had been a fighter pilot during the border wars and knew how to handle himself in dangerous situations. "Admiral," he reported over the communication system, "I'm detecting multiple ships moving to intercept our route. Configuration suggests pirate vessels." The pirates had been watching the human fleet for days, waiting for the right moment to attack. They saw a convoy of civilian ships with minimal military escort, easy prey for a quick raid. What they didn't understand was that these particular humans were not going to run from a fight. Commander Oh Seung-woo coordinated the defense from his battlecruiser, the Incheon's Hammer. He had only 20 military vessels to protect nearly 200 civilian ships, but his crews were highly motivated. They knew that any ship lost to pirates meant fewer Velari would be saved. The pirate attack came at dawn, ship time. 30 raider vessels dropped out of hyperspace and charged toward the human convoy, weapons blazing. Their leader, a notorious criminal called Red Claw, expected the humans to surrender immediately and offer tribute for safe passage. Instead, the human escorts moved to intercept while the civilian ships formed a protective formation. The converted cargo vessels deployed shields and returned fire with their improvised weapon systems. Even the hospital ships launched fighter squadrons to defend the convoy. The battle was fierce but brief. Human tactics focused on protecting the evacuation ships rather than destroying enemies. They used their mobility to outmaneuver the heavier pirate vessels, striking quickly and then retreating before the raiders could respond effectively. Red Claw's flagship, the Blood Hunter, found itself surrounded by 5 human ships. Instead of continuing the fight, the pirate leader opened a communication channel. "Human Commander," Red Claw's gravelly voice came over the speakers. "What cargo do you carry that's worth dying for?" Commander Oh Seung-woo's response was broadcast across all frequencies. "We carry hope, pirate, and we're not dying today." The pirates retreated, confused and frustrated. They had never encountered prey that fought back so fiercely while protecting others. Word spread quickly through the criminal networks. The human convoy was too dangerous to attack. But the pirates were not their biggest problem. 3 weeks later, Yoon Jae-hyun detected a massive fleet moving to intercept them. The ships bore the black and red markings of the Thrakari Empire. Admiral Nam Hyunwoo studied the tactical display with growing concern. 40 Thrakari warships had positioned themselves directly in the path to Velari space. The Thrakari commander, General Krex, opened a communication channel. "Human vessels," Krex's voice boomed across space. "You are approaching restricted military zones. Turn back immediately or face the consequences." Nam Hyunwoo had been expecting this confrontation. The Thrakari Empire had opposed the rescue mission from the beginning, and they wouldn't let the human fleet pass without a fight. But he had prepared for this moment. "General Krex," he replied calmly. "We are on a humanitarian mission to save innocent lives. We have no military objectives in your territory. The Velari are not your concern, human. Your species lacks the wisdom to understand galactic realities. Return to your small corner of space before you cause more trouble." The 2 fleets faced each other across the void, weapons ready but not yet firing. The human ships were outnumbered 2-1, and the Thrakari vessels were more heavily armed. In a straight fight, the humans would lose badly. But Nam Hyunwoo had one advantage the Thrakari didn't expect. While the main fleet negotiated, Dr. Shin Minji had been working with a small team to establish communication with other species in the region. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The chorus was a hive mind species that most other civilizations ignored. They were peaceful traders who traveled in small, unimpressive ships. But they had been listening to the human communications about the Valari rescue mission, and their collective consciousness was deeply moved by humanity's determination to save strangers. Human Admiral, came a new voice over the communication system. This is Prime Voice of the Chorus. We offer our assistance in your noble mission. Suddenly, 50 small chorus vessels materialized around the human fleet. They weren't warships, but their presence changed the tactical situation. The Thrakari would have to attack not just humans, but also the chorus, which would bring the Trade Federation into the conflict. More ships began arriving. The crystalline architects, who had remained neutral in galactic politics for centuries, sent a squadron of their living crystal ships. A group of rogue Nexus Syndicate vessels, their crews disgusted by their leadership's refusal to help the Valari, joined the growing fleet. General Krex found himself facing not just the human convoy, but a coalition of species united by a common cause. His military training told him to attack immediately before more ships arrived, but his political instincts warned him that attacking such a diverse group would have serious consequences for the Thrakari Empire. "You are making a mistake, humans," Krex transmitted. "The Valari are doomed regardless of your actions. You will only succeed in getting yourselves killed." "Maybe," Nam Hyunwoo replied, "but we'd rather die trying to save lives than live knowing we did nothing." For several tense hours, the two fleets remained locked in standoff. Then, unexpectedly, the Thrakari ships began to withdraw. General Krex had received new orders from his superiors. The Thrakari Empire couldn't afford to start a war with multiple species over what they considered a lost cause. "This is not over, human," Krex's final message warned. "When you reach Valari space, you will find no welcome there." The human fleet continued its journey, now accompanied by ships from a dozen different species. The rescue mission had become something larger than anyone had expected, a symbol of cooperation and hope in a galaxy that had grown cynical and selfish. Dr. Shin Minji worked tirelessly to coordinate between the different species. Her communication protocols allowed humans, chorus, architects, and others to share information and tactical data. For the first time in galactic history, such a diverse group was working together toward a common goal. As they approached Valari space, the fleet received regular updates from Lumina Prime. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The dying star was throwing off massive solar flares that were already damaging the planet's surface. Millions of Valari had taken shelter in deep crystal caves, but those refugees wouldn't protect them from the final explosion. Dawn had become the unofficial liaison between the Valari and the approaching rescue fleet. Her ability to sing in harmonics that humans could actually hear made her invaluable as a translator. She worked with Shin Minji to prepare her people for evacuation procedures they had never needed before. "The ship songs you send us are beautiful," Dawn transmitted to the human fleet, "but we do not understand how to board your vessels. Our bodies are not like yours." Park Sujin spent hours working with Valari engineers to design boarding procedures that wouldn't harm the crystalline beings. Every detail had to be considered: air pressure, gravity, temperature, even the frequency of light that the ship's systems produced. The final weeks of the journey passed in intensive preparation. Human engineers modified their ships based on information from the Valari. Medical teams trained on crystalline biology using advanced simulations. Pilots practiced emergency evac. The news reached Earth 3 days later, spreading across every communication network like wildfire. In Seoul, people gathered in the streets to watch the broadcasts on giant screens. In New York, the stock market stopped trading as everyone focused on the unfolding story. In Lagos, children asked their parents why the pretty crystal people had to die. President Lee Min-ho sat in his office, reading the same report for the 10th time. The numbers were devastating. 40 million Valari needed evacuation in 18 months. Each Valari required special atmospheric conditions that no existing ship could provide. The cost would bankrupt Earth's treasury 3 times over. His advisors filled the room, their faces grim. Defense Secretary Park Jin-woo shook his head slowly. Mr. President, we simply don't have the ships. Our entire fleet consists of 200 vessels, and most of those are small patrol craft. We'd need at least 500 specialized evacuation ships. The economic impact would be catastrophic, added Treasury Secretary Kim So-hee. We're still recovering from the Mars colony disaster. If we spend everything on this mission, we won't be able to defend our own worlds. Lee Min-ho listened to their arguments, but his mind kept returning to the images from the council meeting. He had watched Kim Dae-ho cast humanity's lone vote, standing alone against the entire galaxy. The young ambassador had done the right thing, but now Earth faced an impossible choice. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His secretary entered quietly. Mr. President, there are people gathering outside. They want to speak with you. Lee Min-ho walked to his window and looked down at the plaza below. Hundreds of people stood there holding signs and banners. But they weren't protesting, they were volunteering. Signs read, "Engineers for the Volari," and "We stand with the Crystal People and count us in." Similar scenes were happening across Earth. In Tokyo, the entire shipbuilding union had voted to work for free on any rescue mission. In Stockholm, scientists were already designing new atmospheric processors. In Cairo, pilots lined up to volunteer for what everyone knew would be an extremely dangerous mission. Dr. Cho Yuna received the call at 3 a.m. As Earth's leading expert on alien atmospheric systems, she had been expecting it. President Lee Min-ho's voice was tired but determined. "Dr. Cho, I need to know if it's possible. Can we build ships that can keep the Volari alive during evacuation?" Yuna had been working on the problem since the news broke. Her team at the Seoul Institute of Technology had been running simulations non-stop. "It's possible, Mr. President, but incredibly difficult. Volari need a crystalline dust in their atmosphere that's only found on their homeworld. We'd have to synthesize it artificially. How long would that take? 6 months to develop the process. Another 6 months to produce enough for the evacuation fleet. We'd be cutting it very close." The president was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" "Every atmospheric engineer on Earth, unlimited funding, and a miracle. You'll have the first 2. The miracle will have to come from somewhere else." Admiral Nam Hyun-woo had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 15 years. He had fought space pirates, negotiated with hostile aliens, and survived 3 major battles. But he had never faced anything like this. His staff officers filled the briefing room, their faces showing a mixture of determination and worry. Captain Park Soo-jin of the research vessel Persistence spoke first. "Admiral, we've completed the initial assessment. To evacuate 40 million Volari, we'll need every ship in the fleet plus at least 300 more." "Where do we get 300 ships?" asked Commander Lee Dong-wook. "We build them," Nam Hyun-woo replied simply. "Every shipyard on Earth is being converted to evacuation ship production. We're also retrofitting cargo vessels, passenger liners, even old mining ships, anything that can carry people through space." The engineering challenges were enormous. Volari physiology was completely different from human. They needed lower gravity, specific atmospheric composition, and their crystalline bodies were fragile. Standard human ships would kill them within hours, but humanity had advantages that other species lacked. They adapted quickly, learned from others, and worked together when faced with a common goal. Teams of engineers collaborated across continents, sharing designs and improvements in real time. Factory workers pulled double shifts without being asked. Even children contributed, collecting raw materials for recycling into ship components. Kang Ji-won had studied alien biology for 20 years, but she had never seen anything as beautiful as Volari physiology. Their bodies were living crystal matrices that processed energy directly from light and sound. They were incredibly efficient, needing very little food or water, but they were also extremely vulnerable to environmental changes. "The good news," she explained to the medical team, "is that Volari are very resilient once their basic needs are met. The bad news is that getting those needs wrong, even slightly, will kill them quickly." The team worked around the clock to design life support systems that could keep both humans and Volari alive during the journey. They had to account for everything from air pressure to the specific frequency of light that Volari needed for nutrition. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts continued on other fronts. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho worked tirelessly to convince other species to help. But the responses were always the same. The Thrakari Empire declared any human ships in Valari space would be considered unauthorized military vessels. The Nexus Syndicate began spreading rumors that humans planned to enslave the Valari as cheap labor. The worst blow came when several human colonies expressed concern about the mission. The governor of Alpha Centauri sent a formal protest, arguing that Earth was abandoning its own people to save aliens. Some corporate leaders threatened to withdraw support for Earth's government if the mission proceeded. President Lee Min-ho called a special session of the World Assembly. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva to debate humanity's response. The arguments were fierce and emotional. "We're talking about bankrupting our entire civilization," argued Representative Chen Wei from the Pacific Federation. "What happens to human colonies if we spend everything on this rescue mission? What happens to our souls if we don't?" replied Representative Maria Santos from the South American Union. "We have a chance to save 40 million innocent people. How can we call ourselves civilized if we turn away?" The debate continued for hours. Some speakers focused on practical concerns, resources, defense, economic stability. Others spoke about moral duty, human values, and what kind of species humanity wanted to be. Finally, President Lee Min-ho took the podium. The Great Hall fell silent as he began to speak. "My fellow humans," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of Earth through the broadcast networks. "We face a choice that will define us for generations. We can be practical, safe, and small. We can protect what we have and let others face their fate alone. Or we can be the species that stands up when others sit down, that reaches out when others turn away." He paused, looking out at the assembly. The Valari have never hurt anyone. They've lived in peace for millions of years, creating beauty and knowledge. They ask for nothing but a chance to continue existing. If we abandon them now, what does that make us? The vote was closer than expected, but it passed. 187 nations in favor, 23 against, 12 abstaining. Earth would mount the largest rescue operation in galactic history. As the assembly ended, messages of support poured in from across human space. The Mars colony pledged their entire mineral production for ship construction. The Asteroid Miners Union donated their entire fleet of cargo vessels. Even the distant research stations at the galaxy's edge sent what supplies they could. In shipyards across the solar system, the sounds of construction echoed day and night. Sparks flew as welders worked to retrofit civilian vessels with military-grade shields and Valari life support systems. Engineers tested and retested every component, knowing that lives depended on their work. Dr. Cho Yuna stood in her laboratory, watching the first batch of synthetic crystalline atmosphere being produced. It had taken 4 months of non-stop work, but they had done it. The artificial atmosphere was identical to what the Valari breathed on their homeworld. "Will it work?" asked her assistant, Dr. Kim Hyun-bin. "It has to work," Yuna replied. "We're running out of time." Admiral Nam Hyunwoo reviewed the final fleet composition from his command ship. 200 ships of every size and description, all modified for the rescue mission, massive colony ships that could carry thousands of Valari, fast courier vessels for emergency evacuations, military escorts to protect the convoy from pirates and hostile aliens. It wasn't enough. Even with every ship they could build or convert, they could only carry half the Valari population. But it was a start, and humanity had always believed that something was better than nothing. The fleet would launch in 2 weeks, beginning an 8-month journey to Valari space. They would arrive with only 6 months before the star exploded. 6 months to evacuate 40 million people while facing opposition from the most powerful military in the galaxy. As Nam Hyunwoo looked at his mixed fleet of warships and converted cargo haulers, he wondered if they were heroes or fools. But then he remembered the words of an ancient human philosopher. The great crystal city of Lumina Prime sang its morning song as Dawn stepped onto the observation platform. Her crystalline body caught the light from their dying star and scattered it into rainbow patterns across the walls. Like all Valari, she could speak through harmonic frequencies that made the air itself vibrate with meaning. But today, her song was filled with worry. The star that had given life to her people for millions of years was growing larger and brighter each day. Soon, very soon, it would explode and destroy everything they had ever known. The Valari had built their civilization in harmony with their world, growing cities from living crystal that sang with the planet's own voice. Now all of it would be lost. The council meeting begins today. Her father, wisdom keeper of memory, sang to her in low, sad tones. Perhaps the other species will help us. Dawn wanted to believe him, but she had heard the whispers from the few Valari who traveled to other worlds. The galaxy was not kind to those who were different. The Valari needed special air to breathe and specific gravity to live. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could break easily in the wrong environment. They were not like the other species who could adapt and survive anywhere. Far across the galaxy, in the Great Council chamber on Nexus Station, Kim Dae-ho sat alone at the human delegation table. Around him, hundreds of representatives from dozens of species filled the massive hall. The Thrakari delegation took up an entire section with their tall, armored bodies and weapons that gleamed in the artificial light. The Nexus Syndicate representatives wore expensive clothes and constantly checked their profit calculations on small devices. The mysterious ethereal collective floated in their containment suits, barely visible through the swirling mists. Dae-ho was the only human representative. Earth was still new to galactic politics, having joined the Council only 50 years ago. Most of the other species saw humans as young and naive, not worth listening to, but Dae-ho had studied every species in the galaxy, learned their languages and customs. He believed that understanding each other was the key to peace. The council leader, a massive Thrakari general named Warlord Vex, called the session to order. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. "We gather today to discuss the Valari situation," Vex announced. "Their star will explode in 18 months. They request assistance for evacuation." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing Lumina Prime and its dying star. Beautiful crystal cities covered the planet's surface, connected by bridges of living light. Dae-ho had visited there once and had been amazed by the Valari's peaceful civilization. The Nexus Syndicate representative, a thin creature called Prophet Seeker Crix, stood up first. "The cost of evacuation would be enormous," Crix said in a voice like grinding metal. "Special ships, special environments, special everything. The Valari cannot pay for such services. They have no valuable resources to trade." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The ethereal collective representative spoke next, their voice echoing strangely from their containment suit. "The Valari chose to develop their civilization in isolation. They did not build relationships with other species. Why should we bear the cost of their choices?" Dae-ho felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Around the chamber, other representatives nodded and spoke about economic realities and resource allocation. They talked about the Valari like they were discussing the weather, not the lives of 40 million sentient beings. "The Thrakari Empire has consulted our military advisors," Warlord Vex said. "Evacuation of the entire Valari population would require resources equivalent to building a new fleet. Such ships would be useful for only this one mission, then become worthless. It is not practical." More voices joined in, all saying the same thing in different ways. The Valari were too different, too expensive to save, too much trouble. The galaxy had limited resources, and they needed to be used efficiently. Some species were simply more valuable than others. Finally, the council leader called for testimony from the Valari themselves. A hologram flickered to life, showing Wisdom Keeper of Memory standing in his crystal chamber on Lumina Prime. His ancient form was beautiful and alien, like a sculpture made of living starlight. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he sang. His voice translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We do not ask for charity. We offer our knowledge, our art, our songs. We have studied the music of the spheres for millions of years. We know secrets of crystal technology that could benefit all species. We ask only for a chance to continue existing." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Prophet Seeker Crix laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone uncomfortable. "Songs and crystals? What use are those? Can they power our ships? Can they feed our people? Can they defend our borders?" Other representatives began talking loudly, dismissing the Valari's offer. Dae-ho watched in horror as they reduced an entire civilization to numbers on their accounting sheets. The Valari had created beauty beyond imagination, had lived in peace for longer than any other species, had never hurt anyone, but because they could not offer military technology or valuable trade goods, they were worthless. Warlord Vex called for order. "The Council will now vote on Resolution 2847, Emergency Evacuation Assistance for the Valari species." The voting began immediately. Species after species voted no with barely a moment's thought. The Thrakari voted no because it would cost too much. The Nexus Syndicate voted no because there was no profit in it. The Ethereal Collective voted no because the Valari had chosen their path. Even species that Deho thought might be sympathetic voted no, claiming they lacked the resources to help. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Deho stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber. He thought about Dawn and her father, about the Crystal Cities singing their last songs, about 40 million people facing death while the galaxy turned away. The human delegation votes yes, he said clearly. Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. Warlord Vex looked at him with something like pity. Human representative, you understand that your species lacks the resources to mount such an operation alone? Yes, Deho replied. But that doesn't change what's right. The final vote was announced, 847 species voting no, 1 species voting yes. The resolution failed completely. Warlord Vex banged his ceremonial hammer. The Council has spoken. The Valari situation is classified as a natural disaster, beyond our scope of assistance. No Council resources will be allocated to evacuation efforts. As the chamber began to empty, Deho remained in his seat, staring at the hologram of Lumina Prime. He thought about sending a message to Dawn, to tell her that help was coming. But what help could humanity provide? Earth had a small fleet, limited resources, and no experience with such a massive operation. Still, as he finally stood to leave, Kim Deho made a silent promise. The galaxy might abandon the Valari, but humanity would not. Somehow, some way, they would find a way to stand with those who had been left to die.